Hi lovelies, you're welcome to Stanyaka. So I'm going to be teaching you how I made this basque waistline gown with under bust gathers. So if this is something you're interested in, kindly watch till the end. So for this tutorial, I'm making use of a crepe fabric which I have 3 yards of it with me with 1 yard of lining, my zip and my thread. So this is my pattern paper which I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder line. From my shoulder line I mark down to my bust line. From my shoulder line I mark down to my under bust line. From my shoulder line I mark down to my waistline. Below my waistline I came down by 5 inches to get the basque line. Now I'm going to take my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Then I'll take 3.5 inches for the neck wideness. Now on that 8 inches point that I mark for my shoulder line, I'll come down by 1 inch to get the shoulder slope, which I'm going to connect to the neck wideness on my shoulder line. The next thing I'm going to do is to take my armhole circumference divided by 2 from this point here. Then I will go ahead to connect the points together like so, meeting the shoulder slope point. Now I'll go ahead to also rule a straight line across like so, this line which I'm going to label my chest line. Now the next thing I will do is to divide my bust measurement by 4. I'll mark the point here on my chest line, and then I will divide my armhole circumference by 2. I will mark the middle point. Then from that middle point, I will go in by half of an inch, and then I'll go ahead to connect the front armhole like so. So this is basically what we do for our normal pattern drafting, okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do is to mark my bust circumference divided by 4 on my chest line. Then I'm going to take my waist circumference divided by 4 on my waistline. Now this particular dress does not require any dart at the front, okay? Now I'll go ahead to connect both points together like so. Now after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to connect from that my body point on the waistline to the basque waistline here, okay? Now this is it for the basque waistline shape, okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to come down from this point here, my chest line here, by 1 inch. Then from that 1 inch I'm going to connect it to my neck wide nails. Now this is totally optional. You can decide to connect it to your chest line itself, or you decide to go up from your chest line by 1 inch. It depends on how deep you want the front neckline to be. So for mine, I'm going to connect this from the under bust line to the bust line here, okay? So just watch what I'm doing. Then I'll go ahead to outline the under bust line, okay? Now after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to divide my nipple to nipple measurement, okay, by 2. So it's 8 inches divided by 2 give me 4 inches. On my bust line alone, I'm going to mark that 4 inches like so. Then below my bust line at the side, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches for my side dart. So now I'll go ahead to connect it to that 4 inches I marked on my bust line, okay? Now this is totally optional if you don't want to make use of side dart for this dress, okay? Now I'll go ahead to mark this out because I'm going to be closing it. Now I'm going to be cutting this front piece out. So after cutting this out, I'm going to be cutting this on my fabric on fold, okay? And then this upper part as well, I'm going to cut it on my fabric on fold. So now on the shoulder line, I'm going to divide what I have there by 2. I'll get the middle point and then I'll go in with my ruler to connect it this way, okay? So I'm just going to rule a straight line across like this, which I'm going to be cutting this closer to the shoulder line, okay, so I can do my spread pattern, okay. Now the next thing I will do is to slash through the bust line so I can close my side dart. Now this side dart is totally optional, okay. So now I'll go ahead to close the side dart and then I will secure this with my tape in place. So on my fabric, I'm going to be spreading this with 2 inches or 2.5 inches. But I'll advise if you don't have a bigger bust to spread it with 1.5 inches. Okay. Now I'll go ahead. This is all for the front pattern of this dress. I'll go ahead to draft out the back pattern. Okay. Now for the back pattern, I already went out to take my body measurement. I mark out 1.5 inches for my zipper allowance. Then I mark out my shoulder line. From my shoulder line, I mark down to my bust line. From my shoulder line, I mark down to my waistline, okay, for the back. Now for the back is 16.5 inches, while for the front is 18 inches. So go ahead to measure yours so that you know the difference. Now on my shoulder line, I'll mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Okay, I'll mark the point there, and then I'll mark 3.5 inches for the neck wideness. Now on that 8 inches point, I'll come down by 1 inch, and then I'll go ahead to connect it to the neck wideness on my shoulder line. So this is for my shoulder slope. The next thing I will do now is to take my armhole circumference divided by 2 here, and then I'll go ahead to connect it to my shoulder slope like so. So after doing that, I'm still going to rule a straight line across like so. This line I'm going to label my chest line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to label it, and then I'm going to be coming down to get by 1.5 inches to get the neck depth for the back. Okay, now I'll go ahead to connect it like so. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take my bust circumference divided by 4 here on my chest line. I'll mark the point there, and then I'll go ahead to connect the back armhole like so. Now after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to take my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 will give me 4 inches. I'll mark that 4 inches on my chest line all the way to my waistline. So the back of this dress is going to have a dart, okay? Now I'm going ahead to connect the points together like so. Now on the waistline here, I'm going to be marking half inch beside the dart leg. Then I'll go ahead to connect it like so to the chest line. So this is it for the dart of the back. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to, I already took my bust circumference divided by 4 here on my chest line. On my waistline, I will take my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart intake of 1 inch. Now I'll go ahead to connect the body points together like so. After doing that, I'm going to outline the waistline. Then from that waistline on the zipper allowance area, I'm going to go in by half of an inch, and then I'll connect it like so. Now this is to avoid any zipper bulge, okay? Now I'm going to be cutting this side off. The next thing I will do is to extend this line here to the zipper allowance, and then for the back I'm going to be cutting times 2 of it. So this is totally all for the back pattern. I'll go ahead to cut this out. So after cutting this out, I'm going to be notching the dart on the fabric, and then I'll be holding it from the fabric itself, okay? Now this is all for the back, and this is all for the front pattern drafting of this dress. Now I'm going to be teaching you how you can cut out the gathers of this dress, because the front has a basque waistline while the back has straight line. If you don't want to do this slash and spread pattern, okay? So first of all, I have 3 yards of my fabric. Like I said earlier on, I'm going to mark out half inch at that point here. Then I will minus my front half length of 18 inches to get the full length of my gown, okay? Now after I'm getting the full length of my gown, which is 45 inches, I'm going to rule a straight line across like so, and then I'll go ahead to cut it, leaving 1 inch for the hemming allowance at the down, okay? So this is it for the gathers of this gown, okay? Now I'm going to fold this by 2. Okay, so fold the 3 yards of your crepe by 2, or your material by 2. Get the middle point, notch it, and then go ahead to fold it again by another 2. Okay, and then you will notch the point again. Okay, this point here, you're going to notch it again. Now if you notice, you're going to be having 2 layers that is not on fold, then 2 layer that is on fold. Okay, then this other part is on fold, which is the front part that will first of all notch. Okay, now go ahead and open it back. So you're going to notice this notch that we have there, okay, at the other side here. So now from the middle point of your fabric itself, Okay, I'm going to be going down. You're going to mark out half of an inch for the stitching allowance. So from that point, that is where you place your tape. Remember, from the waistline when drafting, we came down by 5 inches to get the basque waistline. Okay, now go ahead, place your tape from that half inches point here, then go ahead to mark that 5 inches. Okay, now after marking that 5 inches point here, then you go ahead, use your chalk to trace this like so to this notched part here. Okay, so just watch what I'm doing. So this is just like me connecting it from the side notched part to the middle of my fabric where I came down by 5 inches. Okay, so I did it this way because I'm not making use of slash and spread pattern for the gathers of this dress. Okay, so after I'm done marking the points, I'll go ahead to pin this down. After pinning it down, I'm going to be cutting this, leaving half-inch stitching allowance while cutting it. Okay, so after cutting it, I'm going to notch back the middle point of my gathers, and this is totally all for the gathers of this gown. I'll go ahead now to cut out the top part of this dress on my fabric. So I fold my fabric by 2 and I'll go ahead to place this. So I'm cutting this part on fold. So I'm going to pin this down like so here, and then I'll go ahead to spread this with 2.5 inches. Okay, now after spreading it with 2.5 inches, I'm going to pin the pattern paper on my fabric. Okay, now I'll go ahead to add 2.5 inches for the allowance. Half inch will be to turn the lining, then 2 inches for the allowance of this dress. Okay, now you can go ahead to determine the allowance you want to leave for your dress. You can leave 1 inch, 1.5 inches. It depends on what you want. Okay, now I'll add half-inch on the remaining part, and then I'll go ahead to cut this out. So for the back part of this front piece, I'm going to cut on fold as well. I'll add half-inch allowance up and down. Then for the side, I'm going to add 2.5 inch allowance, just like I did for the other piece. Okay, now go ahead to cut this out. Now after cutting this out, I'm going to be cutting the back piece times 2 of it. Okay, so I went ahead to mark half-inch allowance all around, then only the side, that is where I added 2.5 inches. Okay, so after I'm done cutting this, I'm going to be cutting the lining of it off camera. Okay, now I'll go ahead to start sewing it. So for the front piece, I've gone ahead to cut out the lining, which I cut on fold for the up and the down. Now, if you have your stay, please make use of your stay. Okay, now I'm going to open this up. I'm going to be placing the lining right side facing the right side of the fabric. Okay, now I'll go ahead to stitch the two sides and also the neck line. Now after stitching with half of an inch on the neckline and the two sides, so on the neckline I'm going to notch it like so. Then I will go ahead to turn this to the front side. After turning to the front side, I'm going to stitch the armhole area and then the down part. Now after stitching with half of an inch, then I will run a loose stitch at the underbust line here to create the gathers. Okay, now after doing that, this is what I have. I'm going to keep this aside so I can sew the basque waistline part. Okay, so for the basque part, I'm going to unpin this and then I'll open this up to sew right side facing the right side with the lining like so. I'm going to stitch both sides. After stitching both sides, I will turn this to the front part, then I will stitch the top and the down part, then also go ahead to notch the top and the down part, that is the middle of it. Okay, now after notching the two middle part, that is the up and the down, I'm going to keep this outside. Then I will go ahead to bring the top part, that is the bust part of this dress, then I will notch the middle part of it as well, just like so. So now I'll place the basque part right side facing the right side. Then I'll make sure that the middle of the basque part is touching the middle of the bust part, okay? So I'll go ahead to pin this down like so. Now after pinning it down, I'm going to be stitching one side first before I stitch the other side. But I will make sure that the gathers that I have on my bust is going to align with the measurement I have on my basque waistline part. Now after doing that, this is what I have. I'm going to keep this aside to sew the back of this dress. So I notched the zipper point for the up and the down. I also notched the dart point as well. Now I also went ahead to cut out two pieces of the lining. Now I'm going to place this right side facing the right side. Then I'll go ahead to stitch the neck area, the zipper area, then the side with half of an inch. After doing that, I will go ahead to notch the neck area and then turn this to the front side of this fabric. So after I'm done turning to the front part, I'll stitch the down part. I'm not going to be stitching the armhole area, okay? Now the next thing I'm going to do is to measure where I'm going to hold my dart up to. So it's 7 inches. I'll go ahead to mark that point on my fabric and also the lining part, okay? So I'm just going to trace this to the lining part. Now after doing that, I will use my ruler to rule a line to that point like so, and then I'm going to be holding my dart up to that point. Now after holding my dart up to that point, this is what I have. I also did it for the other side of the back, okay? So I'll just go ahead to pin down the zipper allowance side. I'm going to cut out the excess lining at the shoulder here. Now after cutting it, I'm going to be placing the right side facing the right side of the front so I can join the shoulder line. So watch how I'm doing this, okay? I will open up the between the lining of the neck joining and the main fabric. I'll place the shoulder of the front in between it, and then I'm going to pin it down. Then I'll stitch with half of an inch. So I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other shoulder line as well. So this will give it a neat finishing, okay? So after joining the shoulder line, this is what I have. The next thing I will do is to turn this to the back side so I can shape it. But first of all, I'm going to be pinning this down, okay? So remember I added 2.5 inches for the side of this dress while cutting on my fabric, okay? Now I used half inch to turn with the lining. Now the remaining 2 inches is what I'm going to use to shape both sides, okay? So I'm going to be shaping one side with 2 inches, the other side with 2 inches, okay? Now I'll go ahead to mark that all the way to the down. I'll repeat the same thing for the other side as well. Then I will go ahead to stitch it, okay? Now after doing this, I'm going to turn this to the front part. Now after I was done shaping it, this is what I have for this dress. Now I'm going to open this up so I can measure the round waist of this dress. So from one notch part of the zipper allowance side, I'm going to measure it all the way to the other notch part of the zipper allowance side to know what I have. So it will give me guideline of how ruffled or how gathered I'm going to make my gathers, okay? Now after doing that, I've gone ahead to make my gathers, okay? I use the method using loose stitch, okay? Now after doing that, I'm just going to minus my zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. Then I'll go ahead to mark the point, okay? Now after doing that, remember this our gathers while we were cutting it, I mark out the middle point of these gathers and then the side point of these gathers, okay? So I'll go ahead to make sure that those points are matching the exact point that is supposed to match. That is, the side is going towards the sides, the middle point is going towards the middle point, okay? So I'm going to place this from the middle point first, right side facing the right side of the top piece. Then I'll go ahead to pin this down. Then I will also go ahead to pin this down all the way to the notched part, or that is the zipper allowance notched part, okay? Then I will go ahead to sew this all around. I'll first of all sew one side before sewing the other side. So at this point, lovelies, if you find this tutorial very helpful, please do not forget to subscribe, comment, share and like, okay? So now I will make sure that my zipper allowance notch on the gathers is matching the zipper allowance notch on the top. So I'll go ahead to make sure that they are aligning for both sides. Okay, then I'll also make sure that the side that I notched for the gathers is also matching the um side of the top part. Okay, so please just go ahead to watch this so that you understand better. Now after doing that, I'll go ahead to sew this and then I'll turn it to the front side. Now after I was done joining the gathers to the top, this is what I have. I'll go ahead to mark down 5 inches from the waistline. Okay, from the back I will come down by 5 inches. That is where I'm going to close the gathers from. Okay, using 1.5 inches. Now after closing the gathers, this is what I have here. I also went ahead to place my zip. So now I'm going to be working on the sleeve of this dress. Okay, now for the sleeve of this dress, there are some that have rubber like elastic at the hand, but for mine I'm not going to be needing the elastic at the hand. Okay, so for the sleeve I'm going to fold my fabric by 2 like so, and I also fold it like this. Okay, now this is a small sleeve, about 6 inches for the length. Now I also went ahead to rule a straight line here, which is my stitching allowance. I will mark down to that 6 inches for the length of my sleeve. Then the remaining inches I have there will be for the hemming allowance. Now from this upper part here, I'll come down by 4 inches to get my bicep line. Okay, now I'll go ahead. So what I'm going to use to fold the down of this sleeve is about 1.25 inches. Okay, now I'll go ahead to mark my round arm measurement, which is 8 inches on my bicep line. I will also mark it on the full length line. Okay, now I'll go ahead to connect the points together like so. Now I'll also go ahead to rule a slant line meeting the middle point of my sleeve at the top. So now I'm going to get the middle point and then I'll go ahead to draw out the shape of the armhole. Okay, now I added 2 inches for the allowance. Okay, now after doing that, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So while cutting, I'm going to add ½ inch stitching allowance here at the top. Okay, now I'll go ahead to notch the middle point and then I'm going to separate the sleeve because I cut out both sleeves together and notch out the part where I'm going to hem towards the lining part. Now this is me so cutting out the lining part of this sleeve. Okay, now I'll go ahead to start sewing it. So I'm going to sew this right side facing the right side. Okay, I'll go ahead to stitch the down part. After stitching it, I'll open it up and then top stitch on the lining part. Okay, so I'm going to top stitch on the lining part. After doing that, I'll stitch the sides. Now after stitching the sides, I've also gone ahead to fix one hand of the sleeve. Okay, I went ahead to top stitch the top part. Now I'm going to teach you how I fix the one side of the sleeve. Okay, now I'm going to bring my sleeve. I'm just going to trim out the excess that I have here. Okay, then after doing that, I'll go ahead to place the sleeve, that is the middle point of my sleeve, on the middle point, that is my shoulder line here. Okay, I'll go ahead to pin this down like so. I'm going to pin it all the way to the joining at the side. Okay, so whatever allowance that is remaining, I'm going to be closing it later on. Okay, now I'll go ahead to pin this all the way to the joining at the side. So you can see where I stopped pinning it. Okay, now I'll repeat the same thing for the back side. Okay, I'm going to pin it all the way to the joining at the side. So after pinning it, I'll go ahead to stitch with ½ inch all around and I'll be right back. So after I was done stitching with ½ inch all around, I'm going to be closing the sleeve. Okay, so I'll make sure to join the two sleeves together like so. Okay, I'll go ahead and then stitch it with the allowance that I left. Okay, which is 2 inches. Okay, now after doing that, this is it for the sleeve. As you can see how this is looking so lovely. Now I'm going to go ahead and hem the down part of this my gown. So I'm going to be cutting out these rough edges. Okay, before I go ahead to hem the down part. So I'm going to fold this with half inch, then another half inch. Remember, I left 1 inch for the hemming part while cutting the gathers, okay? So I'll sew this all round, and this is totally all for this gown, as you can see. So lovelies, please do not forget to subscribe, comment, share, and like. I will see you in my next tutorial. But for now, bye and thanks for watching.